So welcome to Tech Conversations with Grace Chng, Gavin. So nice to have you with us today. This podcast is a series by News on Tech, which aims to raise business leaders' intelligence on horizon and future technologies. Our conversations will engage tech experts like yourself to highlight the technologies that have the potential to create substantial advancements in the future and significantly impact industries, economies, and societies. So Gavin Barfield is the CTO for ASEAN at Salesforce. He's also a recent father of a second baby.
That's right. That's right.
A girl?
Another girl. So excuse my bags under my eyes, but all's going well.
But that's congratulations for you. Good, good work. So you lead the solutions engineering team across ASEAN.
That's right. So I work at Salesforce. I'm the VP for Solutions. So we work with our customers basically defining how Salesforce solutions will help drive business value and have a remit across the whole of ASEAN.
Okay, but you have work experience across England, Singapore, and the Philippines.
That's right. I've been
in
the game for a while, increasingly number of years. So I started off in the UK, and then I was in Singapore for a very long while, and I've been in Singapore for 24 years. So long while here, and then I also spent some time in the Philippines.
But you have been in energy, tech.
That's right. Originally in energy. So I came over to Singapore, working a lot with Singapore Power and the Energy Market Authority on the deregulation of the energy market. Okay. And then I moved across to the Philippines and worked as a CIO and CTO for Meralco, Manila Electric Company, and then the Ayala Group in the Philippines, and then came back to Singapore to work here at Salesforce.
So then you've come back to tech.
Come back to tech in a very exciting time. I have to admit, when I joined, it was just during the pandemic. Everybody was struggling on this sort of move to work. How do we go back to the office, hybrid office approach? And then suddenly AI and generative AI just burst into the scene 2 years ago, and that's changed everything. So it's never a quiet day in the office at the moment in the last couple of years.
Yeah, so talking about bursting on the scene, so in the blink of an eye, every time I turn around, there's the shiny new buzzword called AI agents. Can you just tell us a little bit about what AI agents are?
Well, AI agents is really the third wave of generative AI. So the first wave was predictive AI. And of course, predictive AI is looking at historical data to try to predict the future. You look at what happened in the past and you say, because this happened in the past, this is likely to happen in the future. Right. Then generative AI burst onto the scene, the ability for large language models to be able to generate content. So whether it's text, whether it's images, whether it's video, whether it's sound. And suddenly we saw AI not just be able to predict what may happen, but actually create new content and create new stuff to consume. And now we've moved to the third, which is really around agentic AI, about agents. And these agents are able to be autonomous. So where generative AI was really around providing almost like a co-pilot experience, like providing tips and helping employees and helping customers, but still with a human in the loop, agentic AI is really around AI agents being able to operate autonomously and able to complete transactions and whole processes without human involvement.
You would have to give instructions for an AI agent, right? It just can't come up on its own.
No, that's right. When you develop the AI agent, you're able to specify instructions and you can specify actions. So just like humans, when you have a new member of staff, you would give them particular instructions and you would say, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. You would define the scope of what their role is. You would give them certain instructions and you would then be able to give them certain actions that they're able to do. The same is true of AI agents. But critically, you are instructing the agents using natural language. So if you look at our agent builder, there's no sort of codes and if, buts, then. There's not that rigid structure. And what we've seen in traditional chatbots is that they've been very rigid. You develop them like a tree. If the customer asks this, then do that. If that. And because you develop that tree, you can easily get lost in that tree structure. Right. But with an AI agent, you're defining an instruction and you're defining actions, and the artificial intelligence is then sequencing and works out what you need to do in order to satisfy the customer's requirements.
How does it really work? So let's say I have an AI agent for procurement. How would it work?
So what you would do is you would define the scope of that agent. So you would say, for example, for procurement, you're allowed to raise purchase orders, but you're not allowed to cancel purchase orders, for example. So you would clearly define the instructions and what that agent is allowed to do. Secondly, you would want to ground that agent on data. So we're able to bring in structured and unstructured data using things like RAG and our data cloud and vector databases that exist inside, because that agent needs to have knowledge. Right. And just like a human, they have to learn institutional knowledge, and you do that by giving it access to data, and critically unstructured data. because really, historically, we've always used structured data, rows and columns in sort of computing talk.
Yeah.
But recently, the ability to bring unstructured data, which is where often knowledge exists, so in PDF files, in postings, in Slack messages, in whatever format you may have, you bring that unstructured in, and then the agent has data and is able to learn from that. And then thirdly, you give it actions. So you tell it, these are the things you're allowed to do or you know how to do. And that might be update a record, call another system, create a prompt, whatever you do, whatever you need to be able to do to fulfill the action. And then from that, the agent is then able to understand what it needs to do, what it can do and what it can't do, how to do it, and then the data it needs to be able to satisfy that.
What are the best use cases so far?
We're seeing a lot of use cases, predominantly in customer service. And actually, I think a recent report showed that 41% of us humans spend time on unproductive or repetitive tasks.
Right.
And both in whatever job we have, there's a lot of stuff that we think, I just wish I didn't have to do this.
Okay.
And if you look at an area like customer service, a lot of people who service customers on the phone or through other channels spend a lot of time doing routine and mundane tasks. I want to cancel my order. I want to update this, I want to change this, I want to do this. Those sort of mundane tasks, 41% of humans' times gets taken up by that. So on customer service, we're seeing a tremendous opportunity to be able to use AI agents to automate that and then free up humans' time to do higher value activities.
Okay.
We're also about to launch in the next week or so our sales agent as well, in addition to the customer service. So with sales, this agent is able to help you provide tips when you're on a sales call. So it can able to talk to the customer about this. This is how you handle this objection. Okay. And we're also able to then do a mentor. So where you want to practice your sales, instead of having to practice it with your boss or with somebody physically, you can practice it with an agent as many times as you want. And that agent will give you feedback and say, hey, this was great, or you could have brought this point in, or this was not a good point to raise, or this was a great point you raised. So you have the ability to tune your sales, your sales muscle using AI agents as well.
So what is the technology that has brought us to this point?
So behind the scenes on the agents, it's a complex sort of web of many different technologies that have come along. The first one, of course, is the large language models, which, as we just discussed, came on the scene a couple of years ago. Those large language models allow us to talk to customers in a very natural language.
Right.
And one of the limitations of previous chatbots is they've been very rigid. You have to press 1, press 2, press 3. Right. Or you have to do a voice command, and if you don't, it doesn't exactly recognize what you're saying, and it doesn't completely match how it's programmed, right, it won't be able to respond. So the large language models allow you to be able to talk in a very natural way. Yeah. Secondly, we've got small language models. So small language models are, as the name suggests, smaller models that are trained to do specific purposes. So they're trained on much smaller data sets, and they're much more specific, but they can work in collaboration with large language models. The third technology is XLAM, which is an action model, a large language action model. And what that can do is it can sequence a number of actions to be able to work out what needs to be done to satisfy a particular request.
For enterprise, one of the reasons they're very concerned with Gen AI is hallucinations and all the risks, wrong information generated, etc. How can you develop AI agents reliably? What are the considerations you have to look at?
I think if you look really at where some of the generative AI has failed to sort of get off of the starting blocks, it's because it hasn't been based on great quality data. And if you don't have great quality data, you can't trust the outputs. So if you look at some of the issues with the generative stuff, the wave 2, staff were looking at the results and saying, okay, but I better go and check it because I'm not entirely sure this is correct. And that's not how you want agents to work. And certainly if you move to an autonomous sort of regime where the agents are able to work without human intervention, then you need to have trust in the data. So the first thing you need to do is make sure it's grounded in really good quality data. And that's where Salesforce and our data cloud comes in. Good quality, trusted data, whether that's structured or unstructured data, that you can use to ground the AI.
So you need good data as the first consideration.
Correct. And good data reduces hallucinations as well. Because AI models, if they don't know it, they don't have the data, they will make it up. If they know it, they won't make it up. So if you ask it to come up with something and you tell it the data and you tell it the actual stuff that it needs to do, it will produce a good response. If you fail to do that, then there's a risk that the model will just hallucinate and make it up. So the first thing I think is great quality data.
Okay.
Secondly is putting this into the flow of work. So we sort of looked a little bit at AI, and some companies looked at AI as a bolt-on. Here's my AI tool, and here is all of my other applications. We really see AI being embedded right inside the flow of work, right where work happens. So if you're using Salesforce, you're using Slack, we see that AI to be embedded right there in those applications, not something you have to toggle to and cut paste to and jump in and out of different applications. Your AI will be really there where the work happens.
So after data, good data, the second thing you need to do is to identify a task in that workflow.
Yes, and I think some of the challenges were generative AI. The second wave was a sort of solution looking for a problem.
Yes.
Or like a hammer looking for a nail to hit, as you may say. So companies were very keen to do stuff because you had to. All your competitors were doing stuff. It was the buzzword. If you were a CIO and you hadn't got an AI strategy and you weren't doing AI pilots and AI trials, there's some serious questions being asked over your abilities. So everybody was keen to rush to do these Gen AI trials. But what we've seen is many of them have failed to get off the starting block because of those reasons. They weren't grounded in good quality data. They weren't use case approached, so they weren't looking at them from where are my biggest problems, where are my biggest opportunities, and tailoring the AI. It was, let's just put this technology somewhere so we can use it. And then thirdly, not being in the flow of work, creating a very disjointed experience.
So an AI agent is something like a robot, an automated system.
It's an automated AI solution. So it's the ability really for the agent to be autonomous in the way it works. Okay. Now, when we get onto robotics, which is more like the fourth wave, that asks the question of how will we interact with these AI agents in the future? Okay. And at the moment, we interact with them predominantly through voice. We're launching our voice solution when you call up somebody on the phone, or through text, whether that is through any channel, whether that's through a chat or through a WhatsApp or whatever that messaging platform that might be.
Would an AI agent be able to clone itself or to spawn, give birth to other agents?
I think, what you'll see, is AI agents evolving into a network of different agents. In the same way that in real life, in a real company, everybody has roles. And you don't have one person that can do everything in the company. You will have a person that specializes in this. You may have a payroll assistant. You may have somebody who handles this particular workflow. You'll develop agents to define the scope well so that they do a particular task. And then you may have other agents that are controlling agents, orchestrators, if you like, that are in charge of being able to call other agents to define tasks in order to meet the objective.
So they're independent thinkers, AI agents, who then think that I need another agent, another slave agent, for example, to do something for me. And so you'd be able to create that agent.
Yes, I think the architecture would be more like that. Instead of you creating one massive agent that does everything, which is going to be quite difficult to control, quite difficult to train, quite difficult to be able to monitor, you will have agents that do specific tasks, and then you may have other agents that are able to call those agents. Okay. And I think what'll be interesting is how agents and humans will collaborate together. And we really see this. This is really about AI and humans working together.
Okay.
And as an example, obviously you're in the journalism field. If you were collaborating with some other journalist on writing an article, you may be in a Slack channel. You might be talking to other humans around what should we write in this article. There may be an agent also inside that channel. A research agent, for example. So when you have a question and you say, I wonder what the GDP growth in China is, right? Instead of asking a human, you may ask your AI agent that's part of that channel to go off and do that research. And that agent is tasked at producing that particular task, and it will come back. In the same way that you may delegate that task to a human, to a researcher, you may delegate it to an AI agent, and it will come back and give you the response. Okay. So that's sort of how I can imagine AI agents and humans collaborating together.
So what are the guardrails then that I have to put in? Are there any governance issues?
Yeah, what you really need to do is make sure you define the scope very correctly. So as you build your agents, defining the scope of what an agent can do and what it can't do is important. And again, you define these through natural language, but you want your agent to be specific, and you want it to understand this is what I'm allowed to do, and understand that when it hits the limits of what it's allowed to do, it refers itself across to a human. And that's why there's always the human and agent working together. Example might be sales. So one of our agents is going to handle incoming sales. So as you can imagine, Salesforce and others get hundreds, thousands of inquiries per day. putting that to a human isn't always particularly effective because many of those inquiries are going nowhere.
Yeah.
What you want is your human agent to be able to step in and pick up the high quality leads and progress those leads as a human.
Yeah.
So what the agent will do is it may do the initial outreach. It may chat to the customer. It may provide some basic details. It may ask the customer some questions. But it needs to understand when it gets to a particular point, I'm done. I now need to hand over to human to take it forward.
Right.
So we need to. It won't try to close the sale for itself. So we'll understand. Right. I've qualified this opportunity now. I will do a warm handover to my sort of a human assistant or human counterpart, and then they will take it forward. So defining the scope of what an agent can do and defining the points it hands over to human is very important.
Right. So when we're talking about the family of agents, there will be a dashboard for the human to look at, right?
Yes. So if you look at how we've launched, for example, our customer service agent now, we've modified the dashboards that exist within Salesforce to be able to include the agent inside that. So if you're a manager, you'll be looking at your team and you'll be seeing the performance of the humans in your team, and you'll also be able to see the performance of the agents within your team as well. And you can jump in and you can review a conversation, or you could jump in live to see what's going on.
So you can interject.
You can interject into it as well. But I think having that accountability of an agent to a human is important. It's not just about pressing a button and saying, create me 20,000 agents. We want those agents to be accountable and reporting into a human who is responsible for ensuring that that agent is working within the scope and the guardrails that are defined for it.
So every time the lead AI agent spawns another one, the human in the loop will be able to see it, right?
Yes, as we're getting into these more complex scenarios, we'll progress into something like that, I think, where you'll be able to see how agents are interacting with other agents.
And then you can say yes or no.
I think a lot of it is going to be automated. So I don't think it's going to be somebody clicking buttons. But what we will have to make sure is when agents have the ability to create other agents, we understand the guardrails around how those agents will work, and we understand what those agents will do, and we have to make sure those agents keep within scope.
So what's next? What's beyond AI agents? What are we coming into?
The fourth wave is really, as I just mentioned, around robotics.
Right.
And what I mean by that is not necessarily...
That's a humanoid?
It can be, yes, I'm not necessarily a robot in the sort of R2-D2 style, but more around how do we interact with these agents going forward? Because at the moment we're interacting with them via voice or via text.
Okay.
But there's a physical interactions that we do as humans. So how will I interact with those agents? For example, if I go to a shopping center and there is a virtual concierge there, an agent that is able to tell me how I redeem my parking, where are the restrooms, what stores are there. How am I going to interact with that agent in a physical sense? I'm not going to stand there in a shopping mall typing in.
Right.
That's not going to work.
Yeah.
I would interact with them through voice, but maybe I would want some sort of avatar so that I could see, because we get a lot as humans from interactions, right? So I don't want to look at a picture. Maybe I want some sort of,
But
avatar
we're already in
or
that
robotic.
space, aren't we? I'm beginning to see some avatars already around us.
We're moving into that space. So I think whether it's an avatar, whether it's a sort of a moving, or whether it's a physical, like a robot, that physically moves. The next stage will be how do we get agents and humans to interact in different ways, particularly in a physical environment. And if you're looking at retail or you're looking at other elements where there's that physical side involved, then having that redefining the way that we interact with agents is going to be important.
Okay, I just had a thought. Boston Dynamics, that come up with all of those robots, that dogs and that can do patrolling. Do you think they'll become AI agents?
Yeah, I mean, they will become more and more intelligent. We already have, as you mentioned, robotics, right? We have virtual waiters and waitresses in restaurants that can bring us our food. We have patrol dogs. We have various other security things. They will get ability to act more autonomously over time.
So let's jump into business now. As a proprietor of an enterprise, what are the things that I need to do to prepare myself for this AI agent world?
I think recognizing that this is a major technology shift, and I think this is one of the biggest technology shifts of a generation, and we will look back in time and we will realize that this is a defining moment. As enterprises, getting your data ready is critical, and many enterprises have struggled to pull all of their data together. And it's not that companies don't have data. They have lots and lots of data.
Right.
But often this data exists in islands.
Yes.
So you don't have these connected
So in they're siloed.
siloed in different
And there's
systems.
also outside of the company,
That's correct.
external.
That's
right?
correct. So many companies, have thousands of applications, large companies, and these data exist in different silos.
Right.
So the first thing we talk about doing is to unify that data and bring it together, so I can see a single view of my customer. Secondly, is enhancing that database with unstructured data. Because, as I mentioned, that's where a lot of the knowledge and value is. So bringing, using RAG technology, policies, procedures, everything in to create a really solid data set. I think that's where companies should start. Secondly, it's about defining a really good, strong use case. For example, Agentforce launched with Wiley. Wiley is a big educational publishing firm globally, and they've seen 40% increase in efficiency over the case handling as a result of introducing Agentforce. So they've found a particular scenario, a particular use case, and they've implemented it for that and found big benefits. Saks, as a retailer in the US, is finding the same, where they were looking at spending a lot of time handling things like customer returns or shipping. And they said, we don't want that. We want our humans to be able to do value stuff like help our customers choose the right fashion items.
Right.
And I don't want an AI agent to give me fashion advice. I want a human. I want some interaction. I want, as humans, we have an empathy and we have a way of working with each other. But I'm happy to have an agent handle something mundane like I want to return my jacket. That's something that I'm okay for an agent. So they looked at this in the use case and they were able to find this is where I want to use human resources and human capability. And this is where I'm happy to use an agent, and developed an agent around that. So second step is finding the right use case and the right high value use case where an agent makes sense. And thirdly, I would say starting with specific use cases and building on that. Not starting to say, I'm going to transform my entire company into an agent. Find those one thing, try it, build it, and you can build these things relatively quickly in a matter of weeks. Build it, try it, maybe test it internally, launch it externally. We've just launched last week a test bed to be able to really sort of stress test these agents around different scenarios. And then when you're comfortable and that's working, you add more use cases and more use cases to it, step by step.
Do you know that we are a month away from Christmas? Today is November 25th.
Oh, yes, it is. That's right.
Yeah, so time flies. So let's do some crystal balling for 2025. In 2024, enterprises were just trying to get company-wide Gen AI solutions, whether that has lack of talent, fragmented data infrastructure. It hasn't gone quite well. But what is in store for AI agents? Let's start with the risks.
I think we want to make sure that agents are controlled. And that's why I said that it's important to make sure that you define your agent correctly. It's important to make sure that you define the scope and give it clear instructions. It's also important to make sure that you give access to data, to the correct data, to the same agent. So taking a load of data and throwing it into a large language model, you lose all elements of control.
Okay.
Once that data is in the large language model, you cannot give a permission. And we've seen some horror stories of large language models basically sucking in data, and you can't get rid of it. So there's a danger of putting data into large language models because you lose that security and privacy. And so giving AI agents access to the data that they need, but not free-form data, is important to make sure you maintain security privileges and privacy. And that's why things like our trust layer is also important. So our trust layer makes sure that when you're using large language models, you're doing things like blocking out any PII information. You're making sure that you're doing toxicity and hallucination detection. The last thing you want is for your AI agent to start swearing at your customers or to start using inappropriate terms. Right.
So you need to test and retest.
You need to test and retest, and you need to make sure you've got things like the trust layer in place that can utilize we utilize other models to look for toxicity. And of course, toxicity is interesting because it changes in different languages and different cultures. Right. What may be offensive in one country may not be in another. And
Let's end on a good note. What are the opportunities and the good things you can do with AI agents?
A lot, I think. And we've seen that. I mentioned Saks, and we're going to see many more of these coming out. We're working on a number of customers who are very excited by this new technology. I think it poses an interesting question. What could you do if your workforce was unlimited? How would you change your experience, your customer experience, your sales, your marketing, if people were no longer a constraint? Because we've always been constrained by the number of people. So, why can Why can I not offer a personalized, for example, why can an airline not offer a personalized experience to every single customer? Why can it not call up every customer and check before a customer boards, what would you like to eat? What seat would you like? Would you like any extra luggage? How you get in there? You can do that if you've got 100 customers a week. You can't do that if you've got 100,000. Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't do that. If you've got 1 million customers a week, you can do that. So what we had to do, of course, is change the experience.
Right.
The experience is now self-serve. Customers, you get a link, you go in, you check in. If you want to change your seat, you go to this option. If you want to choose your meal, you go to that option. And there's nothing wrong with that. That was done because we have to work within a particular cost envelope of humans and a particular talent envelope. But what happens if that constraint was relieved? What happens if you could have an agent reaching out and have that conversational experience to a customer because you're not constrained by work? And I think that's the exciting part. It's not just about the bottom line. It's not just about saying, okay, can I take an AI agent and can I sort of swap a human for an agent and look, right, I'm saving some dollars. It's really about a whole new way of reimagining customer service, reimagining sales, reimagining marketing. And what we're talking to the most innovative customers about, and they're recognizing that this is not just about the bottom line, this is about the top line, and this is about the ability to rethink the whole way that we serve as customers, because we can now reduce the constraint on
so
physical
if
people.
Talent is unlimited, then we can all do the things that companies can do, all the things that it wants to do.
Well, talent's an interesting topic as well, because as well as having the body, so can I afford to have 100,000 call center agents so I can do a personal experience? Well, no, I can't, because it's very expensive. Also, how do we get access to the talent? And you'll probably experience the same. It depends on the quality of the individual. Often depends on the quality of customer service you get. Yeah. If I'm looking to back an insurance policy and I go and manage to meet the person who's been there 20 years, he or she is going to give me some great knowledge. Hey, Gavin, try this one. This one's not for you. This one. If I find the person who's been there for 3 weeks,
it's not going to tell you
very different experience. But with AI agents, if we could take that institutional knowledge from the policies and procedures, we can put that in an agent. That allows us to upskill talent, so everybody can then get access to the same sort of knowledge base that was in this experienced person's head, and can provide a great level of customer service.
Well, thank you very much, Gavin, for that interesting conversation on AI agents. I surely will look forward to it. And to our listeners, you can view this podcast on News on Tech YouTube channel, as well as listen on Spotify and Apple. Thank you, Gavin.